Greetings, people of Earth. Welcome back. My name is Jax. Today we're talking about gay trauma bonding. So, um, God, gay trauma bonding is when two gay people form a relationship primarily based off of the fact that they both have gone through difficult situations, specifically pertaining to being gay. This is kind of a controversial topic a little bit. I don't mean it to be. I don't mean it to be controversial. I don't have a strong take one way or the other, but I wanted to talk about it because I think a lot of gay relationships are caused by this trauma bonding. So, first, I'm going to talk about trauma bonding, then I'm going to talk about gay trauma, and we will see how we go. So, trauma bonding is this idea that once you are vulnerable with someone and you share difficult things you went through, I don't like using the word trauma. I think it's far too hyperbolic and overused, but trauma does happen. Trauma exists. You know, you can have a traumatic brain injury, you can experience something as a kid that really screwed you up. So, I'm going to use it in that context. Like, we're talking about the idea of, being in the closet and nobody knows who you are and you really hate yourself and you wish you were different, and maybe you try to pray the gay away, maybe you try different things to avoid it. But basically, bonding with someone over shared or similar experiences that were really difficult, really hard, shaped who you are, created habits, whether they were healthy or not. And I can tell you from personal experience that trauma bonding is very powerful. It is not the greatest way to start a relationship, as we will talk about, but it exists. It's a thing we do. We see ourselves in the other person and we think, wow, this person has been through something very similar to me. They understand what it's like to go through it. And you can see this in so many different areas of life. The idea that, survivors of an incident will often meet together and form groups because nobody else can really understand what you have gone through as a person. And so when you see someone else and you truly feel as though they've been through what you've been through, you feel this connection, you feel this bond. That's the whole point of it. Now, gay trauma can vary wildly. Some of us are really fortunate to grow up in families that don't have any prejudice towards being gay. Even in those circumstances, sometimes a person really doesn't like the idea of being gay and dislikes themselves for being gay. That's kind of the situation I found myself in when I first discovered and learned that I was gay. Is I pretty much knew from the start that my family wasn't going to hate me or throw me out or send me to a camp or do anything prejudicial, but I didn't like it myself. I was mad at myself. I was angry. I didn't understand why I was this way. I, felt very, very strongly about it. Thankfully, this didn't last very long, but it existed. Other difficulties can involve, problems when you're a kid, running into situations that no kid should have to go through, no kid should experience ever. And sort of the baggage that you deal with around that idea, the problems that come with experiencing something very adult while you're a child and trying to wrap your head around it. There can also be like bullying, like if you have a very effeminate voice or you want to hang out with girls and you just want to listen to Taylor Swift or Sabrina Carpenter, that bullying can be really detrimental. Bullying in general, we know, has really negative impacts on people, but specifically bullying for being gay or effeminate. Many of the guys that I know, just in friend relationships, had a complete personality reversal because they were bullied for being gay, and they got into super masculine things and they're farmers and truck drivers, and that does have like a big impact on people, and I think it's understated how big it is. The mental health aspect, like I said, when you are wrestling with being gay, it can lead you to some pretty dark places. And there are countless stories, unfortunately, of gay men, you know, hurting themselves because they just can't live like this and they can't wrap their head around not fitting into society perfectly. You also have people who attempt to have relationships with the opposite gender and they say, no, I'm just going to live my life this way. I'm going to have kids. I'm going to take them to soccer practice. And from my experience, a lot of those people are dealing with some pretty big baggage, some pretty difficult situations, and they, in some cases, are living double lives, attempting to fulfill one need and also live in a socially normal kind of way. So that is trauma bonding and gay trauma. Oftentimes when two gay people get together, the conversation of like, when did you know you were gay, comes up. That is often a first date conversation, or at least it seems to be. I've been on many first dates where we have deep conversations about, you know, did your family accept you when you came out? How early did you know? You know, some gay men know as early as possible at 4 years old. Some people don't figure out till they're 20 or 40 or 50. And so that conversation often leads to this idea of like, how were you treated? You know, what happened? What was your childhood like? And I feel like this isn't a typical straight person first date conversation. All of my straight friends typically keep it very light on the first date. They keep it very chill, get to know the person, what's your favorite color, that kind of thing. And maybe it's just who I am. Maybe I'm going on these first dates and somehow like I'm not meaning to put the conversation into this deep psychological conversation. But I do know from personal experience and from talking with some of my gay friends that the conversation tends to steer to that direction at some point, you know, and you then talk about exes and all this other kind of stuff. But initially, you have these conversations and maybe you start to date this person, maybe you start to see them more regularly. And at some point, there will come a time where, you know, the conversation gets quite deep. The conversation gets far deeper than you might have expected. And this is where the trauma bonding happens. This is where we tend to connect with somebody on a very deep level based on what they've experienced and what you've experienced. And in all honesty, human relationships don't take a lot to really connect with somebody. You know, shared interests, maybe a favorite food that you have in common. Maybe you lived in the same place or you've always wanted to go to a place that they have visited. But there's something different about trauma bonding, and specifically in the gay community, where if you have gone through something that is, maybe it's unspeakable, maybe you can talk about it, maybe it's something that didn't affect you too much, or maybe it's something that changed your entire way of being. When you are talking with someone and you see a bit of yourself in them, you say like, oh, this person's been through the same kind of thing as I have. Maybe not to the same degree, maybe not, you know, for any of that kind of reason. But when you see someone and you see yourself in them and you see that they get it, they understand what it's like, that is an incredibly alluring, incredibly attractive thing. We are the whole reason people date is to find someone who they can be with and they can feel safe with, feel comfortable with, feel happy with. And it is so much easier to see yourself with a person when you know they have been through similar things. So in general, that's how trauma bonding in the gay community works. The real question everyone wants to know, is trauma bonding a good thing? The real answer is it depends. I have been in relationships where the trauma bonding happened so early on that I ended up becoming like being in a full relationship with the person, and then later down the road learned that, oh, this was not a good thing. This was not a good situation. And currently in today's culture, trauma bonding is I feel like regarded as more of a negative thing than a positive thing. It's something that like try to avoid. Don't get attached to someone just because they've been through something. You know, it's not enough to have shared difficulties in life to form a relationship. You need shared interests, you need similar goals, similar ideas for the future. You need to make sure that your lives work together properly. And if all you're doing is focusing on the shared difficulties you've gone through, you're going to end up in a situation that you're not really comfortable with and that maybe one day you regret. So, on the whole, I think trauma bonding is something that if you can postpone talking about it until you get to know the person and really trust the person and like the person, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with sharing your hardships. My parents, my grandparents, all of these people have been in long-term committed relationships for as long as I've been alive, and they clearly identify with each other. Have they trauma bonded? I don't know. I can tell you that my grandparents on both sides went through huge adversity, and that probably brought them closer together and not separated them. But do I know if they have trauma bonded over like childhood difficulties? No, it's not really in my purview as the child or grandchild of a person. But I can tell you that trauma bonding definitely has its effect, and you need to be mindful of that effect. So my final warning and words of wisdom to you, if you can call them wisdom, is be very careful about trauma bonding and identifying with somebody just because they have a somewhat of a similar experience than you. And at the end of the day, it's not a make or break. Really, everything else on the ground of your relationship, on the foundation of your relationship, is far more important. So take that with a grain of salt. And let me know what you think about trauma bonding and this idea that you connect with somebody on a deep level after facing huge adversity. Thank you for watching. As always, hope you have an amazing day, week, month, year, century, millennium, whatever you're having. I hope it's amazing. And as always, guys, I will talk to you tomorrow.